Hello and welcome. You're watching Big Picture with me, Vishal Dahiya, and today we're going to talk about the agenda and expectations of the G7 summit. In fact, the 47th G7 summit is being held in United Kingdom this time as the Great Britain has the presidency of the G7 for this year, and the theme is Build Back Better for this year's summit. So in the next half an hour, we'll try and understand not only the focus of the G7 summit in terms of its agenda, but also the expectations out there from G7 and also what exactly lies ahead for India and what's the significance from our perspective, from Indian perspective of this G7 summit. And for more on this, we're joined by two distinguished panelists. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with the former ambassador Dileep Sinha is with us, and we're also joined by foreign affairs expert Dr. Shriram Chaulia. Welcome, both of you, gentlemen. Let me begin with you, Dr. Chaulia, and let's first start by understanding the agenda of this summit. Now, the two key items, as I mentioned, are obviously climate change and the coronavirus pandemic, but the theme itself, Build Back Better, as in what exactly is the significance and the summation here?
Well, Vishal, G7 has always been a US-led initiative of rich industrialized democratic countries. Primarily the US and Canada on one side, then European countries, and then they have Japan. So G7 is more like a gathering of countries around the idea of liberal Western democracy. I mean, although Japan is a bit of a misfit there, but it's also part of the US alliance system. So I think the main expectation for this summit is all eyes are on Joe Biden. This is his first foreign visit as the new US president. And after 4 years of Donald Trump, there was a lot of disruption and doubt about whether the G7 can really maintain its relevance because Trump had trade wars and other disagreements with all his allies. So now Biden is talking up, the rebuilding that alliance of democracies and emphasizing more and more the values-based coordination of democratic countries. So I think the main pressure is on Biden to show that he can again offer some leadership to the G7 and bring it together. So that's the main thing for them, I think, the background factor. And the deliverables, like you mentioned, there's been a lot of criticism of the US for not sharing its vaccines with anybody, for a long time, even though they have a huge stockpile and a surplus. Only now Biden has started making some small announcements. So the big announcement they're going to do is, I think the G7 collectively are going to give away 1 billion doses of coronavirus vaccines, they say. The UK will give 100 million. The US is 500 million. The rest will cover another 400 million. So I think they want to show that the rich countries' democracies are still relevant, as Biden says, and that they're not losing game, because on the other hand, China has been quite dominant and has been striding the world stage since the pandemic began. So Build Back Better also, I think the messaging from the G7 is, look, we are going to reunite, we are going to reduce our differences among ourselves, we're going to also partner with other democracies. You mentioned India, South Korea, Australia, and South Africa have been invited, and together we will still provide solutions to for the pandemic, for the post-pandemic, and climate and other big global challenges. So I think they want to position that this group still has relevance, which was fading, and it had been overtaken by G20 in many ways. But G7 plus 3 or 4, D10, some people call it D10, all these ideas possibly are going to be revived. And Biden is looking on to use the G7 as a means to re-establish some kind of Western leadership in the world. I mean, that's questionable whether they can do it, but that's why they are expanding beyond the West and bringing in more players.
Dr. Chaulia, I'd like to bring you in here, and then if you have to look at the composition of G7 and the leaders who are going to be present there, one or two firsts, that is, this is the first summit, G7 summit meeting for Joe Biden, US President, similarly for the Japanese Prime Minister as well, and seemingly sort of a farewell one for German Chancellor.
Yeah, there are transitions happening. There Europeans, politically, this year Germans are going to have election, and then next year France is going to have an election, and so Macron is also fighting for his political survival. So to an extent, the Europeans had drifted away, as Ambassador Sinha was mentioning, from the US during Trump's time. Even now, they have doubts. I mean, they wonder whether this is just an interval before Trump or another radical Republican will come back in the US. So the transatlantic ties have been weak. And I think Biden is going to emphasize a lot of that. And that's a key for him. And Japan is the only country from the Indo-Pacific region which is a full member of G7. So that's why they wanted to expand and bring in more Indo-Pacific powers, because the idea was the transatlantic alliance plus Indo-Pacific partners all together under one umbrella. So that's why they invited India, South Korea, and Australia. And I think had not the pandemic, blown up like this in India, I'm sure Prime Minister Modi would have gone in person. But his presence through virtual mode is good, because South Africa has also been added on. But primarily, the idea is that there is a broader security or geopolitical underpinning to this expanded formation of G7 plus 3 or D10 or whatever you can call it. And there, I think there's a lot of emphasis on these values. The sessions in Cornwall the morning sessions are all focused on shared values. And I think that's where they're going to try and come together on the supply chain issues, on technology, and of course the vaccines. On all these fronts, they will want to strengthen democratic partners as opposed to China. Russia is a problem, as Ambassador Sinha was mentioning, but on the other hand, we don't have a problem with Russia. So, and nor does Japan really. So, some countries, or South Korea for that matter, or Australia. So there are, if you look at it from the point of view of each individual country, there are divergences and dissonances. But the goal of these kind of multilateral settings is to find a common ground. So what is the common ground? The common ground is they want to show, as Biden is saying, that democracies are resilient, and that democracies can still lead the world. Okay. So I think to that extent, the democracy factor, if it helps us to corner the Chinese, to counterbalance the Chinese, we are happy to jump on the bandwagon. But if they ask us to, also sign on to anti-Russian initiatives, obviously we will not. So, it's a mix and match kind of situation. It shows the complexity of the world. Same with the Europeans. They are not seeing eye to eye fully with the US even after Biden has come back. But they will try to narrow the differences. The US-EU trade war that Trump had started, slowly it is winding down. Now they're reaching agreements to lift the tariffs and all that. So if there is a collective presence of both the Europeans and the Indo-Pacific powers all under one umbrella, as is being envisaged by Biden and to an extent by Boris Johnson, I think that's something good for us as well strategically to sign on to.
Dr. Choliya, your views there on from Indian point of view, because it's quite significant and important that at D10, which you were talking about, or G7 plus 3, India is a very significant part of it. Our Prime Minister will be participating in the outreach sessions virtually. So, what exactly is is there for India in all this? Specifically, if we are looking at the tangible outcomes vis-a-vis the regional security, the Indo-Pacific, and obviously we're talking about the pandemic. We're in the middle of this pandemic, so vaccines and that waiver, the WTO patent waiver, that is something which we've already put forward along with South Africa. So these might be the key issues. What exactly you believe might be the outcome?
Well, we would want them also to pitch in with finance, Vishal, because these are rich industrialized countries. Their economies are now slowly bouncing back after almost 1.5 years of collapse due to coronavirus. Both the North Americans and the Canadians, and the Europeans are now on the recovery path and are bouncing and growing. So they can actually, the World Bank and the IMF are all saying that minimum 50 billion US dollars are required for COVAX and for vaccine equity and for reducing the gap between the fully vaccinated and the non-vaccinated or partially vaccinated developing countries. So I think along with South Africa, want patent waivers, but also financing for this. And same with the climate agenda. Biden, unlike Trump, has come back and made more commitments for carbon emission reductions in the US itself. And now all of them are in a way in the liberal camp, the G7 members, vis-a-vis the climate change issue, and they see the urgency of it now much more than when Trump was there. So again, as developing country, from Indian point of view, we have been saying that more must be done to support the UN processes which will lead to transfer of green technology and also financing. So I think those points come up, equity issues, because ultimately, as I said, the G7 is under pressure, saying how will you prove your relevance in this changed world where China has become a great power? How will you show your relevance? The China is financing, is giving loans, is doing BRI, all kinds of projects. So, and that ties with the regional security also. So the Europeans, we have recently signed a partnership, connectivity partnership initiative with the EU for them to come and invest in the Indo-Pacific region. The same we have with the Quad allies and members. So I think the whole idea is around how we can finance new projects, new initiatives. Apart from military maneuvers and operability and all those things, of course, we are doing. But I think G7 is more of a economics and a finance-centered initiative. Always it has been that way. So we will want them to help us to build our capacities to manufacture vaccines. We'll want them to help us to transition to a greener, build back better, by the way, means, sustainable reconstruction by respecting the environment. So
Indeed.
That is where the G7 pledges will matter, and we can then build upon that, as Ambassador was saying, for the climate change, the next climate change summit, but also climate justice. I'm sure that we will raise these matters, because ultimately, if G7 wants to show that they are generous, want to show that they are humanitarian, want to show that Biden says we can come together and solve the world's problems, then you have to really open your purses also, and because on the other side, the Chinese are smiling and watching and saying, we have got the money to throw around. Let us see how much the G7 can throw around. So I think it's very important that we will emphasize this point, that climate finance, post-COVID finance, and infrastructure finance in Indo-Pacific, all these are the bedrock of a post-COVID world order. If we want democracies to define them, democracies have to also put their money where the mouth is.
Indeed, there it is. The summation of all that can be expected from the G7 summit. Thank you so much, Mr. Dileep Sinha, as well as Dr. Shriram Chaulia, for your views and insights.